Okay, it's been a hello, everybody. Laura Fielding here, Executive Director of Red Berets Medicare for All. And it's been like quite a few minutes in time since I did a YouTube live feed. I was attempting to give some updates on Twitter live, and it just kept getting like disconnected and interrupted on both of the live feeds. I talked for a few minutes on the things I wanted to get across, which was probably really just a lot of rambling, but so maybe it's for the best because when I went back to check both of the live streams, they were both cut off very, very early. So let me try to go according to the topic that I said this was going to be about, which is March for Medicare for All in Seattle, and then whole Washington 1362 updates. The only real the only real updates I have for the Seattle March for Medicare for All is that after working on the distribution team for whole Washington 1362 and petitions, I finally feel that I was able to join back up in a more active scale again by Friday night. This last Friday night, finally joining a local steering committee meeting led by Andre Stackhouse. So now, and that's those meetings are on Friday evenings. So if any of you watching are in the Washington State and would like to be part of the Seattle March for Medicare for All, organizing that, having your voice heard, participating in any way, please get in touch with me, DM me. Let me see if I could give you Andre. I think pretty much if you go to M4M4ALL.org, and it will give you the option to get involved in whatever city. So I don't kind of need to have Andre Stackhouse's email, but if you're on Twitter, you can follow him at Captain Stack. But he's got everybody on Trello, which I'm not on Trello. I'm trying to be more present even on Slack at this point in time. So I could try to find his email, but hopefully you all know how to find me on Twitter or on Facebook, Laura Fielding. And then, if you want to email me, my email is l.fielding, FIELDING, at live.com. And I'll get you the information if you want to participate in organizing the Seattle March for Medicare for All. So we do have a pretty exciting announcement for that, but I actually, again, I don't like to get ahead of everything, and I think we're still firming some things up in terms of one of the speakers that is pretty much confirmed. But again, so it's like, just kidding, I don't have that announcement. No, but we're working on it. But what I would say is come along and join us on Friday nights because there's work to be done. We're going to have, we're dividing into different subcommittees. We have security, social media and marketing, what was tabling under? Tabling and coalitions and outreach. So we have outreach to different organizations and in Washington State. Certainly there would definitely be a place for anyone who feels comfortable and confident reaching out to try to get us some press coverage for this. Okay, so we really actually have a lot of need. I would invite and welcome everybody to get involved. And so then if you are watching this and you are not in Seattle and you're like, well, I'm not even in Seattle, I'm not in Washington State, then please, again, go to m4m4all.org and either sign up to host an event if you don't see something near enough to you to get involved in. Again, I would say this does not have to be, if you've never organized anything before, and you don't know where to start, we have help for you. And also if it's a little bit overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, there's no time to kind of do a full-on march, don't worry about it. Go put an event up sign up to do an event. And it can be something as simple as getting a few friends and family members together and just go on a busy kind of intersection and do some banner waving and take pictures and share them to social media with the hashtag M4M4ALL on July 24th. We can make a really, really big showing with actions that are not that difficult to organize. So, you can do banner waving, you can go out and do canvassing, you can have a block party or a barbecue, like a barbecue. You can, what else? You could do a car caravan and everybody just pick a route and honk for healthcare justice and make some signs. And then, people have questions about permits, like, oh, we want to do a march. What about permits? As far as I think everybody should check with their own state and where you're at. But as far as in Washington state, because of COVID, they're not issuing and have not been issuing permits for events. You kind of want to let the local authorities let them know, hey, we're doing this and everything. And it's going to be a peaceful protest so it's all fine. There really isn't permitting to be done. But I hope I haven't kind of belabored all of this point. The thing is, get involved. There's ways for everybody and every skill set to get involved. I'm a crafter. I would rather be knitting really than attending all of these meetings. But at the end of the day, we have to step up. And even if we have where Andre Stackhouse has to come bring something to me to Twitter, and Sharif, I am for M4A on Twitter. He does this all the time too, and in a way, it's kind of embarrassing. It's like, why do these people? Because I'm not very platform and tech savvy, so they're bringing things over. If they know something's essential, they'll DM it to me. So that's one of my thingies. That's one of my I'm sure that Andre Stackhouse is like, Laura, get your butt in Trello. That's where the hell we're organizing this thing, and again, get in Slack, get in the Slack channel. But we do have people of all different ages and all different skill sets and all different capacities. And for me personally, I give up a lot of my personal time is spent managing the Red Berets Twitter account. It's kind of a full thing in and of itself. So I am slowly trying to get better and get onto other platforms. But I guess my only point is don't let that stop you. If that's one of your things, if you're terrible with emails, or you're excellent with emailing, or you're a very, very organized person, unlike me, or you have very particular skill sets, but you feel that you don't have others, don't worry. Our grassroots movement is all about finding where we fit in this movement and finding how we can help. You don't have to have strengths in every single thing. Some people are excellent in public speaking and they'll be putting themselves out front. Some people are excellent at building coalitions and doing outreach and stuff like that. It's really okay. There's place for everybody in this movement, but we do need everybody to step up and get involved, and don't be afraid of it, because we'll find out how to amplify and how to put your strengths to use. And it's on us. As everybody can see, we don't have even the Progressive Caucus kind of stepping up where we need them to be right now. So we need to step up. We need to make these demands, and we're doing that at the state level and at the national level. And we're building this kind of inclusive, side by side, all fronts. It's not about, obviously I think every single person that's organizing at the state level would pass National Improved Medicare for All tomorrow, if that were an option. And that's why we're out getting involved and helping to organize the March for Medicare for All in cities across this country, is because we do know that we need it, but we're just tired of waiting, and we're not going to wait on a corrupt Congress, and we're not going to wait on a progressive caucus that isn't doing what they need to do. And we are not going to wait on veto Biden or anything else. So that's why you have organizations like Whole Washington, where we are literally organizing events that are in service to growing, trying to get more co-sponsors aboard for the federal legislation. But also finally, once we were denied a public hearing for our bill, for our Senate bill here in Washington state, we're over it. Okay. We're going to go out into our community. We're going to gather these 400,000 signatures. And we're going to get it to the ballot because you know what? Building community and building pressure at the local state level and then sharing that energy out to people in other states that can run ballot initiatives, that is going to be in service to the movement. Now, there was somebody on, there's a lot of people on Twitter, and I'm one of them, and I'm not like perfect. And, I have to walk myself back a little bit and be like, wow, I was going to write this person off because they aren't particular supporters of whole Washington, but they're absolutely advocates for Medicare for all. And, I get very much in my, well, why aren't you supporting whole Washington? We don't have a plan at the national, there's no pathway right now. We need to, I think, I was speaking with Sharif this morning and he talks about, we really need to learn in this coalition building and in this movement how to listen a little bit more, how to just don't think of the next thing that we're going to say, but make space for everybody's voices. It really is a very tall order and a tough challenge to bring people with lots of different ideas about the best way to do this. Different parties, different people who have had bad experiences with particular parties, people who are completely nonpartisan and don't want to see any. They're fed up with electoral politics. Do you see what I'm saying? And then the whole MMT debate, which of course I want to be clear is not a debate of certainly not all proponents and people that are educated in MMT are against state level efforts. This is one of the things that has been borne out by a very lengthy thread. And we've had a lot of people come forward, including Stephanie Kelton, who, as you all know, wrote The Deficit Myth, come out to say that it is not her position that state level efforts and organizing undermines the movement. Of course, she knows that it will be that the best way to do it is at the federal level. All of us agree with her on that. There isn't a single person who doesn't. But she did express solidarity and says that she has the utmost respect and offers support, to like that we should be supporting state level efforts because we're building the national movement. We're getting out into our communities, and every person that we get to sign petition 1362 to get universal health care to the ballot is another person that is brought in to the Medicare for All movement, because if they opt in to include their information, we now have them in the whole Washington database. And those people signing are people that very likely, maybe they are not in Bernie's network or the national, you know what I mean? Like they might not be in the database yet. We need to continue to grow this database and grow the movement of people who are actually brought into the fold. And so that's one of the strengths that whole Washington and any other state that comes along to run a ballot initiative can do, is to grow this movement. We aren't just growing it for our own state level efforts. We're growing it in the interest of pushing to fight to pass this at the national level. So, because 400,000 signatures is a heck of a lot of community activism, it's really getting out. And as I said in one of the live feeds that I did this morning, it's helping to get out and visually and in person to person, face to face contact, help to counter these narratives that were propagated during the 2020 election cycle, which was a constant barrage of how are you going to pay for it? And, insurance PR talking points that, CNN and MSNBC and Fox and all of the corporate media machine continued to constantly blanket onto the masses. So that's one of the things that whole Washington and ballot initiatives can do, is we can actually get out there and give people that sense of, oh, actually this is something that real human beings who are standing here right in front of me are advocating for this, because what they had is an experience of corporate media telling them what to think. All right. So I'm trying to provide perhaps a perspective for people who do have And another thing is Twitter is just not, it's not necessarily the best or a complete way of communicating. So it can easily come across as like, um, in these kind of tense conversations, that I or anyone else is dismissing people's concerns. Like, hey, I live in a more conservative leaning state. My state's never going to pass this. So speaking for some of these other people, so I have real legitimate fears and concerns that then this is going to exclude me, that this is not going to be a strategy that's going to work for me. And so I want to say that, first and foremost, to kind of come back to what I was saying that Sharif and I were talking about this morning, it's kind of important to hear that before just dismissing it. So that's a good reminder to me. I get set up in my own way of thinking, which is that I feel that all of us, putting all of the eggs into the national electoral strategy of, a presidential candidate like Bernie, 2 election cycles in a row, and then also investing in Medicare for all candidates, that, at least on its own, has not been a successful strategy. We have to be able to be honest and sit back, and not even sit back, but in movement, we need to be able to assess this isn't working. It's not working at the speed in which millions of people need us to move this ball. Okay. So again, we don't need to completely throw out that strategy, but we need to add things to that strategy. And so it's very easy for me to just kind of think, well, I have this set in my mind that the best way to build the pressure for federal legislation is for there to be an enormous amount of activism, if not passing something, in not just one, but several states. I personally do feel that that is going to build the groundswell. And actually, we really have such a depressed movement right now. People need to see that this is actually possible. I think even people who are very much for this policy, probably including myself, on many days, we actually, if we really dig down to the bottom, do we actually, how much cynicism do we have that this is actually possible? Because if we're honest with ourselves, we look at what we have. We have a corporately owned Congress. We have a president that is adversarial to healthcare justice. And a completely corporately owned media that is still dictating a whole lot of the national discourse and conversation. We're working on supporting and building our independent media. And thankfully now we have so much independent media that is actually action-oriented and activist-oriented, and I could name off a bunch of, Sabby Sabs and the Vanguard and an Amped Up podcast and, Jen Perelman's show, Ron Placone, lots and lots of shows that are loving Fred Hampton leftists and all the stuff. And I'm trying to make time to listen to and get more educated about all these different amazing platforms and independent media that are coming out. So, because this is how I think that we're building the movement, is this true solidarity, coalition building, where we take the power and we empower each other, where we're setting all of our stakes. And when you see me tweeting at Rep. Jayapal, please endorse whole Washington, that's basically to inform the public that she isn't supporting activists in her own state, and people that are very much in the know understand that the Progressive Caucus are not fighting for this policy. They're not fighting for their own legislation, let alone but if they're not going to fight for their own legislation because now's not the time with Joe Biden, I personally believe every time is the good time. I thought we were going to do this if they said we're going to try to push. I never personally believed that we could push Joe Biden left, but it is what was, it was what they were all guaranteeing. They were saying everybody should vote because then we could push the administration left. I didn't buy that for a second, so I didn't vote for Joe Biden because I don't vote for politicians who don't include my policy beliefs on their platform. And I don't support the Democratic Party as a whole because Medicare for All is not on the national party platform. I do support people who are organizing in whatever party that they're doing that. So good progressives that are fighting hard still within that party and who are actually like boots on the ground and lifting and working to amplify Medicare for All and fight for it. That's fine. Any party that you're in that you're doing that, I'm going to be in support of. And that's what we have to do is like build our coalitions. But in terms of why people are like, well, why are you being so hard on the Democratic Party? Well, because Medicare for All isn't on the platform, and they're a corporate owned right-wing imperialist party. So that's just borne out by plenty of evidence and fact. So let's see what else there was. 1362. We did print, we did our initial run. People might be thinking like, well, everything has seemed kind of quiet on the whole Washington front because we've, number one, haven't been as much on social media, but have been actually working to get things like accomplished, which we did not have. We hadn't hired a campaign director. That now has changed. We have now officially hired a campaign director. And we have chosen and decided, and I think are in the process of hiring a fundraising marketing firm that's going to be mostly based on marketing and social media and small grassroots dollars. That's what we're going to do for now. We're not going to get big money. We don't want money from people that are wedded to the corporations or to the Democratic Party, but we will, once we get past the initiative or the signature gathering phase, we will need to look at how we can raise a great deal of money. Whole Washington understands absolutely what we're going to be up against, especially if we make it to the ballot. But if we make it to the ballot, I think we will have a lot of support, financial support and otherwise. But people are going to, and maybe that's rightfully so, a lot of at least orgs and leaders are going to hang back. They're going to wait and see if it's even possible for us to make it to the ballot. I wish that we could have the support of people, but if wishes were fishes, right? So what we are thankful for is that we have a lot of grassroots support. That's really the kind of support that we want anyway, because this is a people-powered movement. So everybody who's donated to candidates, hoping that was the Medicare for All pathway, the old quote from founder Georgia Davenport that I use all the time is a ballot initiative, if passed, will do what it says it will do. It will do what it said it was going to do. It will do that. So if you have donated to candidates, and just like we are trying to donate to great independent media, consider an organization that is all grassroots, working class, nurses led, and we're trying to change. We're trying to really change the narrative, and because we have a lot of these establishment organizations that, and I don't mean to call them establishment organizations, but they've been established for a very long time, and yet they aren't jumping on board to organize and to step up and support the grassroots of March for Medicare for All. We welcome them anytime, but they can see this is happening. We've been very, very prolific on quite a few different social media platforms. So I think it's been obvious that we welcome everybody, and egos shouldn't be hurt. But you see, this is really the way that the single payer movement has worked, is that orgs are territorial. People are like, if that wasn't my idea or that's not my method of organizing, then I don't want that. Or, oh, that organization over there is involved, so actually I don't want to be involved with that. Well, if you have a policy that's supported by 70% or more of the public, but we are fractured into all of these different, I want this, I want it this way, I want it this way, no, I don't want it this way, and if it has to do with that org or that person, then I don't want it. Well, what you're essentially doing and saying is, let's go ahead and fracture the 70+% of support that's for this national policy. That is not a good strategy. We have to be able to put egos aside and say, let's take advantage of the overwhelming majority that support this policy position, because people will often ask, well, if it's that high, um, if we have that percentage of support, why haven't we passed it yet? Well, there's several answers to that. The Democrats are in the tank for the insurance lobby and pharma, the same as Republicans are. But it's also to take not responsibility, but like what I just said, we have a very siloed and fractured and othering within the Medicare for All activist community, where it's like, we don't agree with how you're doing it over there. And then that's your org, that's your state. You're in it for you. And actually, no, we're doing it this way. As long as we have that kind of othering and separation and lack of willingness to listen and work together, we aren't going to get this. We are effectively fracturing our own overwhelming majority that we have to work with. So that's what the march, if I could sum it up, that's what the March for Medicare for All is endeavoring, valiantly so, to do, is to bring all these people together for a day and for a coalition. This day is the beginning, hopefully, of much, much more, and of a sustained effort. But what we have to do is learn to put egos aside, and that includes myself. It's going to be hard for me, because I'm going to continue to be like, why does that particular person have such a problem with whole Washington? Wait, okay, and I need to be able to step back and say, well, I hope that they do come around. But at the end of the day, even if they are not for whole Washington, yeah, I love this comment. Crowded Crow. Hello, my lady Red Beret. The work you're doing is brave and beautiful. Valiant is the right word. Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you. Thanks for joining me. Yeah. So, when I'm doing all of this, I am also talking to myself, because like anyone else, I tend to think like, oh, I have this right, as long as we're doing this coalition of always fighting on all fronts, at the state level, and building, 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 as well as demands at the national level, simultaneous solidarity, multi-pronged approach. This is the way that we're gonna raise the groundswell. Yeah, that's it. And then anyone that doesn't fall within my ideal strategy, I'm having a tendency sometimes on Twitter to just kind of dismiss, or just know you're wrong, and I don't want to be like that. I really do want to, and this, I very much admire Andre Stackhouse, because I think he doesn't get as like um, fiery or forceful. I mean, he, not in the ways like able to kind of listen and give very reasoned and clear responses. And it was actually his comment that where he engaged and got the response from Stephanie Kelton. Now, a lot of us had contributed to that thread from all different perspectives, and Dr. Joe Firestone had done some live streams and shown some real solidarity. So again, there are quite a few people within the MMT movement or community who are very much proponents of like, let's build, let's continue to educate everyone on MMT, and we can support all of this at this. It's a both and thing, and Andre Stackhouse is one of those people. And then Nathan Netbecker on Twitter, I had said, well, we're all donating our money to Whole Washington, and we're donating our time. Why don't some people from the MMT community who want Whole Washington volunteers, or March for Medicare for All volunteers who haven't studied MMT, why don't you donate some of Stephanie Kelton's books? Boom, I made the request, and Nathan came along and donated 5 copies, which I've now allocated 2 of those so far. So you see, we might not come to a complete and absolute agreement on this, but we have gotten somewhere that's closer, which is, we want all of the information. We want to continue to learn and to grow. We don't want people unaware of how things are funded and how MMT, like, we want to grow that movement, right? But we're also not going to stop what we're doing when we have a bill that, by the way, here's the other big update for whole Washington is actually Dr. Gerald Friedman's new study, because you see, we were working on a study that was a little bit dated. We had to pay for a new study. And so where now our literature had been saying from, I think, 2018 or 19, it was when he had most recently done the study. And so it was all pre-COVID. It was going to save the state of Washington $9 billion annually. And that's even considering increasing and making the care comprehensive to cover vision and dental and auditory and mental health and some complementary care and all of that stuff. Even after you add all of those things in to be covered, it still saves the state of Washington $9 billion per year. Well, the new study so whole Washington is working on graphics and working on updating all of the information. So I'm a little bit ahead of things here, but I wanted to let you know that now the numbers are, it saves the state of Washington $12 billion per year. So I'm not going to get too much into the weeds on that, but it saves even more money than what it did when we were looking at the numbers before. So again, it's important to just kind of listen to people and to try to build these coalitions, and they're not going to be perfect, and we're not going to be in lockstep on everything. And like I say, I need to be willing to step back. I won't step back on my efforts for organizing and for getting signatures, because I truly do believe that we're in a crisis. We're in a state of emergency. And right now, as we currently stand right now, the only thing that we have available to us is direct democracy, the ballot initiative, as we saw in New York State recently, as we've seen in California, and as we've seen in Washington State, where we were denied, despite enormous public pressure, we were denied even a hearing for a bill that had 7 Senate co-sponsors. So you see, at the state and at the federal level, everyone who's really, 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 really paying attention understands that we have representatives at every level that are deeply in the pockets of pharma and the insurance lobby. And so I don't want to call legislative efforts a waste. I don't particularly like to label anything in that way. I think we should continue to be on all fronts, continue to ask for endorsements, continue to pressure the Progressive Caucus, continue to try to bring more people aboard the federal legislation. The thing is, don't spend so much time debating and arguing with one another, because if you don't agree with whole Washington or state-based stuff, then go on and spend your time organizing and lobbying to try to get the Progressive Caucus to wield and vote as a voting bloc and demand a floor vote. You know what I'm saying? Because we, whole Washington, and other states that have state-led efforts are not going to wait on a corrupted Congress. We're just simply not going to do that. We're going to continue to fight on all fronts. We're going to bring it to the people. We're going to get them to sign. We're going to get it to the ballot. Yes, we are aware that things could fail. But when I get asked, aren't you afraid that failure is going to harm the movement? It's like, look at all the legislative failures that we've had. We have nothing but legislative failures, actually, to show. So I don't really, I do very much struggle to understand how state level efforts harm the movement when actually we don't have a pathway right now. With veto Biden and with an owned Congress, we don't have a pathway. Now, marchformedicareforall.org is working to help us pressure to continue to try to forge that pathway, public pressure, and a general strike, and building our coalitions to where we are connected up, and we can continue to try to empower our independent media and get activist voices heard, and that's already happening. So anyway, that's what we're doing with that. We did print 400. Well, the first batch of petitions for 1362 that we printed was 500. We printed a very, very small batch at first just to make sure that there were no glaring errors. We didn't want to spend the money to union print these petitions, which they do have to be wet signatures, in case anyone is watching going, well, couldn't you just do this online? Nope. In Washington state, they have to be wet signatures. We need 350,000 to qualify for the ballot, but a lot of those signatures, we need a very, very large buffer, or else we're going to get all these signatures, and then they'll throw out some that don't match or aren't valid or what have you. So we need to gather 400,000 signatures by the end of December. And we are feeling very good about it. We got that first batch of petitions, which was 10,000 signatures worth of petitions distributed to kind of like the most highly involved and motivated volunteers throughout the state. We don't have numbers to report on that yet because those are all out. But I will say, I think a very, very good chunk of those are probably filled out. They're just not kind of turned in yet. So now that we have hired a campaign director, we will have our process for how we're going to, how much, because I think Whole Washington, we're an organization where we want to have as much transparency so that people can be involved. We actually don't want this to just be about Washington state. We're really trying to grow a movement. And if there are other states that have the power to do a ballot referendum, I'll read this comment in just one second. Yeah, so I hear you. You're saying there's nothing. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you can go ahead and ask, and I'll read it as soon as when you put it up there. So you were like, that's why I'm not going to write it right now, is because I don't want to interrupt you. That's fine. I'm really casual on here, and I don't have a very big YouTube following right now. So this is kind of just for me to share out to people who want to hear very specifically about Red Berets and about Whole Washington and about our interface with the March for Medicare for All. And I'm not inviting guests on here because it's time. I'm just not doing that yet. But so I have a very small following here on YouTube, but it's okay. I don't mind just being able to get out some facts out there for now. This works for me. So but I think I've covered everything there. So that was our first batch of petitions that we did. That's all been distributed. A lot of those are probably filled up. I have a lot of filled up petitions just here from Pierce County that are turned in and all filled up. And so then what we did last week was we picked up, we had fixed a couple of things that weren't big errors, but that needed to be addressed. We went back to the printer and the layout and got a couple of things fixed. And then we ordered the whole shebang. We ordered 20,000 petitions, which is 400,000 signatures worth. So then we came and picked that up at the printer here in Tacoma in this big trailer. And then we have our different area leads that our distribution team took petitions to. Okay, so we have a couple of area leads here in Pierce County, and I'm one of them. So I have petitions here. If you know anybody in Washington State and they happen to be kind of in Tacoma, Pierce County, put them in touch with me and I can get them petitions. But it's everything's there on wholewashington.org or on 1362.org or .com. Sorry, that would be yes on 1362.com or .org. Either of those takes you to where you need to be. So if people want to know how to sign the petition or how to get petitions, go to that website. Okay, and if people happen to be near me, I'm on the map, and that will be people can get in touch with me, but they'll be put in touch with their area lead. And I'm sure if there's areas that are not on the map, we will be seeking people to please step up and volunteer to be a petition lead. So there is a lot of room for us to that's kind of what's going to need to happen. We have a lot of dedicated volunteers. We've been told by kind of ballot initiative experts that they don't see a pathway for this. And that's because it's based on the model, the way that we've done the way that ballot initiatives have typically been run is You have a fundraiser and you have a campaign director, and a lot of times you pay signature gatherers. And there's with healthcare, it's a little bit different. People see the urgency, people are aware of it. You can highly mobilize people to come out and pick up at least a petition that they're going to sign and get their friends and family to sign. So we have a lot of dedicated volunteers who will be out 1 to 3 to even 4 or 5 times a week gathering signatures. We have people with weekly goals that are, I'm going to gather at least 100 signatures per week for the duration of this. So those are the kind of like core amazing volunteers. But see, what's going to happen with this is we want a lot of people to come in. We will be allocating petitions to people where we just say, take this and get some friends and family, and even if you don't fill it all the way up, get it back to us, we'll get it filled up. Okay, so we'll have the very dedicated volunteers. We'll continue to grow that volunteer base, and then it becomes exponential. And that's something that hasn't really been the case with a lot of other ballot initiatives, but people do want health care and they do recognize the urgency. So we have a lot of people that are contacting us every single day saying, how do I get petitions? It's a different ball game. And so again, we could be an organization that would fall to the fear mongering of, well, what if you fail? Well, they weren't successful in Colorado, they weren't successful in Vermont, and they actually were successful in Vermont. They passed it, they didn't implement it. Okay, so that there's been a lot of misinformation, and again, those efforts were some years ago before we had built anywhere near. First of all, it was pre-COVID. And secondly, it was pre-Bernie national election cycles and getting Medicare for all really, really out into the public narrative. So you see, we are with this ballot initiative just not even anywhere in the same era as what previous ballot initiatives that were operating. Literally, they were their own little island. We are not that now. We will have national movement support. We have a lot of people that are supporting us, either amplifying us on social media or donating, going on wholewashington.org and ordering a red beret so that they can have a red beret for Medicare for all. And that money is helping to fund ballot initiative 1362. So see, we're doing things creatively. We're inviting people in. We're not sort of this hierarchical organization that's got this. Yes, we do have a board because you have to have some central leadership, but we're an organization that we're very much trying to invite people into the movement, whether you're in Washington State or whether you're in another state and you would like to set up and run a ballot initiative, or you just want to help us from whatever state you're in. We want to include as many voices and as many different skill sets and creative ideas and talents, because one thing we do know is that looking at how things have been done historically, it hasn't worked. It's no disrespect to any of these organizations, longstanding organizations, but we don't have it yet. So obviously something key is things are missing from what has been the national strategy. We need to grow and expand and look at what we need to do differently because we don't have it yet. So, and then whole Washington is endeavoring to do that. So, yes. So, I'm a longtime advocate for Medicare for all, but I live in Oregon, in the Oregon sticks, so I'm out of the loop lately. I'm wondering, do you think the movement would be more successful state by state rather than federal? So, at this point in time, I think that the federal movement, the national movement, is reliant on state efforts because we don't have a way, like we clearly don't have an administration that is passing this, and Bernie's not pushing for it, and Rep. Jayapal is not pushing for it. Yes, she introduced her legislation. Bernie didn't introduce a partner bill. the very best that they seem to be thinking that they will even hope for. And quite frankly, I don't know that I even see that happening, because I don't see a lot of push and a lot of fight for it. And I know stuff happens behind the scenes, but I'm sorry, I just don't see it. Is lowering the age of eligibility for Medicare and improving and expanding to include, dental and vision and some of the things that we need to do to improve and expand it, Medicare. So that would be the very, very best that we would be expecting. Yeah, so I don't know what meant money and capitulation to the pressures of the establishment. So it's literally it's really literally on us. So again, yes, I personally think that in order for federal legislation, and I welcome you to please look up healthcare.movie. So there is a documentarian, and he connected to us when I went on Amped Up podcast, Ryan Knight's podcast, which is Amped Up. So I think if you went on Spotify and you looked up Amped Up podcast, Laura Fielding gets amped up with Ryan Knight, you could listen to my interview with him. And that happened in the end of February. And then this documentarian Kenny Ballantyne happened to hear that episode, and he reached out to me and said, well, has anybody done a documentary on the Red Berets movement? And I said, no, they have not. And of course, that interview was talking largely about whole Washington, and people want to know, well, what's the difference between whole Washington and the Red Berets? Whole Washington is the Washington state effort to achieve universal health care in Washington state. And they organize both locally for our state to pass, and they also do a lot of organizing for the national movement. So we did a sit-in in which you can see a clip of this on Kenny Ballantyne's first time that he came up here to film. We did a sit-in outside of Representative Kilmer's office, where we had quite a good showing of people showing up to demand that Representative Kilmer co-sponsor Representative Jayapal's bill. So that documentary is being worked on, and it's going to include the March for Medicare for All. And again, there's people that are being interviewed soon that are very, very exciting, but who you can see on his website so far are myself and Jason Call for Congress. He's also on the board of Whole Washington, and he's running for federal office. He's running for Congress. And I think he speaks very, very well to, like, where does state organizing fit in to what we all know we need, the national movement to pass national improved Medicare for all. So Jason Call was interviewed, and I think his interview clip is on there, and it's excellent. And of course, Ryan Knights was on there, and it, speaking to why we can't have Medicare for all in the corporate duopoly, both parties being corporately owned. That was a fantastic interview. Also, he interviewed Justin Jackson. So Justin Jackson's interview is on there. Catherine Lewandowski, who is the chair of Whole Washington. She's a nurse and Medicare for All activist, and obviously is working to help pass universal health care in Washington state. She's on there. So there's some early interviews, and there's that action in Tacoma, just to give everybody a taste of what is this documentary. But he's got many, many more really exciting people that he's going to be interviewing, who he's already confirmed, but I'm just not getting ahead of him and announcing those people, because that's his information, and he'll drop that information as he goes along. But that he's hoping that documentary will be finished sometime around January 2022. But again, he is as I understand it, it's this vision of how our state, how is whole Washington and local efforts like this pushing the national movement forward, along with now the March for Medicare for All and grassroots organizers cropping up everywhere to demand things like that the Progressive Caucus aren't even pushing for right now, unfortunately. So, it's going to be a great documentary. Check it out. Follow his work. I think he even has a Venmo or something where you can donate, because he doesn't have funding for this documentary. So any help that people can give him is also amazing. Is, it, is that spelled Ballantine? I think it's an E. It's Ballentine. And that is Ryan Knight's Amped Up. And oh yeah, Jimmy Dore. No, it's not particularly touchy for me. Jimmy Dore has covered whole Washington. He didn't used to be a proponent of state level organizing. He wasn't for a long time, but he did cover. He did a piece covering when the DSA vice chair, funding vice chair or something, made fun of Ryan Knight wearing a red beret and a whole Washington button. So again, like here's my motto. I try, if I think that particular media people are getting smeared because, like, not everybody's going to like Jimmy Dore. He has a very strong personality, but I personally I'm a supporter of Jimmy Dore because I think he tells the honest truth about stuff. And I think that he's receiving a ton of smear tactics because people don't like that he's going up against the establishment, and that includes the Democratic establishment. So that's my take on the matter. And where I stand with things is that if they are amplifying that's right, and that's the thing. You see, we have like a fight. We have firecrackers and wrecking balls in this movement, and then we have bridge builders and people who, some people are just not going to like people expressing anger and outrage. I think that's unfortunate because we actually need people to be. People are angry and people are scared and people are dying and all of that stuff. So I personally think that he is right to express anger. I think we're all rightful. We can express anger at people that we have donated to get them elected to fight for us. You know what I'm saying? And then they're not fighting for these policies. Well, number one, we're paying our taxes are paying their salary. And number two, we donated to their campaigns specifically so that they could try to, and I don't really even like the language, push the Democratic Party left. I think that's ridiculous. I just don't think it's possible. But to go in and very much call out, to be kind of the Tea Party of the left, to go in and break up the corruption. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to call it out. You have to be willing to go and say, I'm not going to make friends in the Democratic Party. I'm actually going to reveal them for what they are, which is corrupt. They're Republicans. That's all they are. They're corporate. They're corporately owned. So we're not getting that kind of blow up the establishment. And people can disagree or say, well, they're in different positions. They have to walk this careful walk. Well, Jimmy Dore doesn't need to do that. And I don't need to do that. And you don't need to do that. Our job is to call them out and to mount enormous public pressure. And that includes expressing anger if they aren't doing what we sent our valuable working class dollars to help them get elected do. That's my standpoint on Jimmy Dore. So anyways, I'm going to end this live stream now, and I hadn't done one for a really long time. So again, I hope you got all the websites, and definitely what I would recommend for wholewashington.org, please go sign up to be a volunteer. I see that you're in Oregon. Thank you for sharing that. And I would just say, in order to be, we are actually trying to grow our coalition similar to how One Payer States has done. Whole Washington is really leading the way for this kind of inclusive, I don't want to say anti-establishment, but basically calling things like what they are. We're willing to call out elected people at the state level and on the national level who take corporate money, and it doesn't matter what party they're in. Whole Washington is that organization that's willing to be upfront about that. And so we are going to be one that's going to have a lot of grassroots support. And then, yes, there's going to be Democratic Party and union, big unions that will come out against us because they don't want the grassroots to be empowered. Let's be pretty honest about that. So we really do want to invite people in to volunteer. There's a lot that you can do even if you aren't in Washington State. And so We welcome your involvement. Go to wholewashington.org and sign up to volunteer. And as well, M4M4ALL.org. And we're working as coalition partners anyway. So thank you very much. You can order Red Berets on wholewashington.org and help us fund our ballot initiative. And please share the video out. Would really appreciate that. Thanks for joining, everybody. Bye. Oh, thank you so much. I have the info. I'm going to check it out. Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks for joining. Bye-bye.